Shalaya Chakshunmitam Jena Tasmi Shri Gurave Namaha Nam Shrishtam Manumati Siddhiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajamurupurim Mathirim Gacchavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Radhikamadhavasam Rapto Yasya Pratitya Kripaya Shri Guntam Natosmi Vancha Kalpataru Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nikhila Shruti Mole Ratnamala Bhuti Nirajita Padapankajam Aji Mukta Kularupashyamanam Paritashvam Harinam Shamshayami Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kalam Shamarpaitum Unnatasvalarasam Sabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sindipitah Sada Hridaye Kandaresh Purato Vasatinandana Ajanalambita Bhujjo Kanakavadatu Sankirtanai Kapitaru Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaro Dhiyavaro Jugadharmapalo Mandi Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataru Vajini Shakti Sarupai Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradanaya Gadadhara Namastutu He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Radhe Vrindavanadisi Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Darshan Mahim Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Aparadha Lakshay Shiktashta Kamaditarangamathe Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Tapanam Vinde Maste Charanarvindam Vinde Maste Charanarvindam Shila Gurudev Ki Jai Sriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai Shri Radha Damodar Ji Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanand. So, pranam to all of you. Good morning, and thank you for joining us once again. So, as we mentioned yesterday, today we have ISTAGOSTHI, which is a Sanskrit term which refers to the interaction, loving, hopeful interaction, and with confidence and trust between different members of the community in the attempt of inquiring, questions and answers, basically. Now, that's why what's life is about, questions and answers. No? We always have questions, hopefully, and we are looking for answers. Basically, every person is running after things, but actually they are running after answers. No? They are trying to solve situations, no? to try to get to something. No? So that's a way of saying there's a question, and that question is like pushing them into so many directions, trying to answer, to solve them. No? As we know, and there are specific questions for us as humans, but every species having their own questions, as we know. The birds are asking the animals like what to eat today, and that question is driving their whole schedule, if you will, where to sleep, how to mate. Those are the, as we know, the questions in the less complex forms of life. Mating, defending, eating, sleeping, that's the main level of inquiry and concern for those species. And we as humans as well can have a license to ask about those things. But also human life specifically is designed for another type of ISTAGOSTHI, if you will, another type of questions and answers, not only limited to the most basic survival instincts, if you will, but as the Vedanta Sutra has put it, Atato Brahma Jignasa. So Atato Brahma Jignasa, which means Atato now, which means now you can read these lines, which means you have human form, because Vedanta Sutra is not being written for birds and elephants because they cannot read Vedanta Sutra. So now that you can read this, it means you are a human, Brahma Jignasa. It's the time to inquire into the nature of Brahman, which means basically into the nature of the absolute or into the nature of consciousness. So it's time to make those types of questions, basically. And from that up, basically upwards. So ISTAGOSTHI has to do with that, with presenting questions and receiving answers. And in the process of that inquiry, which is really like the very paradigm of our tradition, you see Bhagavad Gita, you see Bhagavatam, you see Chaitanya Charitamrita, you always find this important like sessions and interaction, no? Krishna and Arjuna, Parikshit and Sukadev, Ramananda Roy and Mahaprabhu, and so on. No? Always this particular format is there, no? Questions and answers, questions and answers. So that's the way we enlighten each other and show our affection. Krishna says in the Gita, Bodhayanta Parashparam Katayantastamam Nityatu Syantichara Manticha Machita Madgatapana. My devotees get together and they enlighten each other and they show affection to each other by always speaking about me. Speaking about Krishna is not just like quoting, get together, okay, you quote a verse and you read something, but sometimes I have this question, this doubt, how to understand it, how to deal with it, how to better embrace my daily sadhanas. We spoke yesterday, sadhanas, an inner effort to invoke inner transformation. So fervent effort for inner transformation. How to do that? My Guru Maharaj likes to say like, Sadhu Sangha means that at the end of each day, we get together in a circle and we share how we failed today, each other, in the sense of being realistic, acknowledging that, but also open to how I can do better tomorrow. And let others share their own experience and myself be nourished by that and learn from my mistake, from their mistakes, and grow together. So that's also a way of ISTAGOSTHI, if you will, this type of question and answer between sincere aspirants of divine love. So that's it. Are there any questions? Questions or topics? Something you may like to hear about, or something you may feel the need to further develop, or something that was waiting from last evening's lecture that we didn't have time for Q&A. So, I mean, not necessarily the questions have to be limited to what we spoke yesterday, but of course, whatever is the need of the moment. No?
I wondered, yesterday you mentioned about that if one somehow fails, so to say, to properly perform or execute like the spiritual path, it's kind of not appreciating the gift you have gotten. That I don't remember actually in which context, but I was thinking about this topic that on one side you have been explaining how it is nice to actually integrate our subconscious, like whatever is there, the shadow side of ourselves, and to embrace it, and at the same time to try to integrate it. But somehow if we do not, I wonder about if we do not perform in a good level, or we cannot like actually be successful right now, does it mean that we do not appreciate the gift we have gotten? and how to make the balance between these two. On one side, we embrace our shadow side, so to say, and try to like integrate it. On our side, if kind of we go for it, and it's not like a very perfect performance what we do there, does it mean that it's not appreciating the gift we have got?
Yeah. So I would say one thing is not necessarily mean the other. No, it doesn't, because sometimes one could say, I mean, one could go paranoid or make others paranoid. Like, you have not reached the goal yet. It means you are ungrateful or something like this, or you are offensive, even worse. No, and just discourage other people, and that's nonsense. Because if the end result of what you are saying is discouragement, it's like, of course, you may say something nicely and properly, and the other gets discouraged, and that may be their problem also. I mean, it's not that always, if someone is giving some kata and someone in the audience gets disturbed, it's not that it's the fault of the speaker necessarily. Because if the audience is not sincere enough to accept, okay, that's what I need to hear, that's what I need to accept and incorporate, it may be the fault of the hearer also. No? But also, of course, it can happen that the speaker, and that happens quite often sometimes, they uses the philosophy, if you will, or even the Siddhanta to just justify the unjustifiable, basically, you know, or applying that in a very narrow-minded way, and instead of bringing light and hope to the audience, if you will, just like smashing everyone in the name of this is the highest thing and you're not there and something. And probably the one who is speaking like that is not there either, because if you are there, you will be kind enough and generous enough to extend to others. As we were speaking yesterday, we worship Sriman Mahaprabhu, and he's the deity of compassion, basically. No, these two arms he has, we know, has to do with that. No, the arm rising down is trying to extend to us, to the lower of the lowest. On his raised arm, right arm, is reaching the highest of the highest. So the highest of the highest, even to the lowest of the lowest, Mahavadanya. So if in our school we have such a kind deity, I mean, it is expected that we are to represent that spirit in our own. As representatives of Mahaprabhu, we should be kind to each other to begin with. So what to speak, kind to every living entity, but sometimes we have first to think in terms of our own Gaudiya community, because sometimes that's not happening in the Gaudiya community. So what to speak of extending that to the whole universe? No, let's begin at home first. No? If we don't know how to deal with each other at home, what to speak of conquering the world in the name of Mahaprabhu? That's won't happen. So so not necessarily. Now, if someone is, again, you are mentioning one is not being successful in one sadhana. I don't know, what do you mean by that? Of course, because to be successful doesn't mean that tomorrow I have arrived at Prema Bhakti or something. No, I mean, success, there are different ways of conceiving this idea of success, and also sometimes the very idea of success can be dysfunctional also, no, because sometimes we may just like project our notion of success in this world, which is really closely tied to perfection and doing everything like, no, this is the perfect way of doing this, the only possible perfect way, and it doesn't work like that in bhakti. No, I mean, in bhakti, Krishna himself is not that concerned with perfection, basically. No, I mean, he's concerned with integrity and sincerity, and he doesn't pay too much attention to imperfection, actually. You know, the most controversial probably verse in the Gita, Krishna is saying that very strongly. Api chet sudaracharo bhajanti mamananya bhakt sadureva samantabhya samyak vyabhyasito hisaha shipram bhavati dharmatma sasvachantin nigachati kamtya pratyanihi name bhaktya pranashati. 2 verses, 30-31, chapter 9. Very intense verses. He's saying to Arjuna, even if someone misbehaves totally, it's a Suduracharya, not an Acharya, but a Suduracharya, someone who is doing the worst spot. But if that person is Bhajanti Mam Ananyabhak, trying to worship me with a sincere heart exclusively, even though still some things are making him or her fall on the way to that, Sadhureva Samantavya, says Krishna. For me, Mantavya, I consider them sadhu. For me, that person is sadhu already. Even though still it's like coming up and down, coming up, but in his internal prospect and ideal, that's fixed for that person. I want to fully surrender. Whatever happens in the way of that, Krishna says, I'm not saying that. I have no eyes for that. I just have eyes for Bhavagrahi Janardana, for the essence of that. He says, Sadhureva Samamtavya Samyakya Vyasito Hisaha. He prambhavati that very soon he says that person becomes righteous, Satvachantim Nigachti, and attains everlasting peace. And then he ends saying to Arjuna, Kaunteya Pratyanihi Name Bhakta Pranashati. Declare boldly that my devotee never perishes. He's saying with intense emotion to Arjuna in that moment, my devotee never perishes, my devotee never perishes. Nevavi Kramanashasti Tatyavyayana Vidyate Salpamapyasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Vaya. Krishna also in chapter 2. The one who adopts this path, there's no loss or nor diminution, even though whatever may happen in between. So we have to have strong faith in these things. Krishna is not trying just to sell as a product and exaggerate the nature of bhakti. He's actually saying what bhakti is, how generous, how powerful. I would say the main problem for many of us is sometimes that we don't have still enough faith in this type of words. Basically, we don't believe fully Krishna fully yet. Even though he's saying that to us with tears in his eyes, with full emotion, with full conviction, and he's saying to Arjuna, declare this to the world. I promise this. So many times in the Gita, he's saying in these terms, I promise this. This is a fact. This will happen. And we have so many testimonies of devotees that show that in practice. The Bhagavatam is full of that as well, of people who were also led astray, you say, like lost in one moment of the path, and in such a merciful, grateful way, Bhakti still was there with them. So I say that in the sense of, okay, we are not successful in our sadhana. What does it mean not being successful? I would say not being successful is you are not being sincere enough with yourself. I mean, you can be unsuccessful. Of course, there's place for that, but it's not so much about a level of perfection that we have idealized by, I don't know, comparing ourselves with Sanatana Goswami and feeling I have not arrived there yet. It doesn't mean you're not being successful or you are doing something wrong or you are not being grateful enough. I think that may take to, I mean, it can be that, but not necessarily. So that requires like self-examination, like we were speaking the other day with some devotees in Radha Kund, and one devotee was asking, so Maharaj, what if I've been practicing for quite a long time, he told me. So I asked him, how long? 8 years. So I started to laugh. I mean, with all respect for those 8 years, I'm not like underestimating that, but I mean, of course, you can reach perfection in a moment. The potential is there, but generally speaking, the 8 years is like nothing, basically. You have eternity doing nonsense, and for 8 years, you are trying to not do nonsense. I mean, you cannot just demand. So where is my full meal of bhakti now? Where is the full fruit? I mean, 8 years. It's not, you have to be willing to wait a little bit. You have to have longing, as we always say, but you also have to have patience on the two things, especially when you start to realize the breadth and depth of the gift and how deep it is. You cannot just like, hey, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, one lifetime. Bhava Bhakti, where are you? I mean, as we always say, if you really appreciate the nature of the gift, you will be willing to pay whatever price it has to be paid in order to obtain that. That's real lobha. So that's an important point, because I was thinking about that yesterday. We always speak about lobha. Lobha means greed. And Rupa Goswami mentions, and not only Rupa Goswami, it's mentioned everywhere, that the adhikar for engaging in Raga Nuga Bhakti is lobha. That's important point. We belong to that school, Raga Bhakti, but it's not that easy to practice Raga Bhakti, I mean, in one sense, because you have to have greed for that ideal. And of course, that has to do with not having greed for any other things, proportionately, gradually. It's not black and white. So greed means I want that, but also sometimes greed, what's the difference between greed and impatience? Because you may say, I want it now, I want, but maybe in the context of really wanting that, you may have to wait, and there's place for waiting while being greedy. No, if you're really greedy for that ideal, whatever you have to wait, in that waiting, your greed will increase. You follow? So but you have to wait, because again, you appreciate the depth of the ideal, and that is not something cheap that I will attain in one weekend. So I know I may have to wait even 1 to 3 lifetimes. Srila Sarmanas will say, we always share. Once one devotee asked him, like, how many lifetimes will it take for me to reach the ultimate goal if I'm beginning in this lifetime bhakti? He said 2, 3 lifetimes, generally speaking, if you are serious sadhaka. And the devotee was shocked, like thinking, that long? 2, 3 lifetimes. And when Srila Siya Maharaj saw the devotee shocked, he was shocked. Do you think it's too much, 2, 3 lifetimes? So many Brahmanda Brahmiti Kono, you have been traveling into the different universes for another time, and now in 2, 3 lifetimes you can reach the highest potential of. You're saying it has too much? I'm shocked. The two were shocked for different reasons. So there's place for waiting and being patient, and while doing so, increasing your greed. That means, that shows you have real greed. You follow? If you say, I'm greedy for that, and someone says, okay, but you have to wait one lifetime. Oh no, I'm no longer greedy for that. That shows you have no greed at all. But if you are really greedy, means I'm willing to pay whatever price it's required, and that means I'm willing to wait. But while waiting, it's not just like I'm waiting. Tell me whenever that's ready and I go. No, while we're waiting, you are not waiting. You are increasing your longing. No, that's the purpose of the obstacles in one's life. We see that, no, like in the life of, for example, the associates of Mahaprabhu, the 6 Goswamis. They wanted all of them to join Mahaprabhu. For example, Gopal Bhatta Goswami met Mahaprabhu in South India, as we spoke in our previous series. He was relatively young at that time. And when Mahaprabhu visited them at Rangam for 4 months in Chaturmasi, after Mahaprabhu was leaving, Gopal wanted to go with him. Mahaprabhu said, no, stay here, take care of your parents, and when they pass away, you can join me. So again, he had the greed. He was Gopal Bhatta Goswami. He was not just like some teenager passionate impulse. He really wanted to join. Mahaprabhu said no. So you can imagine, he was waiting for years in South India. He was not just like waiting, okay, when my parents pass away, I join Mahaprabhu. He was raging in fire internally, blazing for reaching that moment. Or similar with Sanatan Goswami. He wanted to join Mahaprabhu, he was put in jail. So obstacles. I want, but this comes on the way. But all that, like, again, make his longing even stronger. And with this, you can go with every Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami also wanted to join Mahaprabhu, and the parents were keeping him at home. He was like coming from a millionaire family. So they wanted him to be a nice married person, an entrepreneur in the world, and so on. And he wanted just to wear a kopin and worship. So they were bringing him back. He will escape from his palace, and the parents will send people to catch him on the way and bring him back home, like this, many times. So again, he had very intense, passionate longing, but he had to wait somehow. But in that waiting, all that was increasing. So why I was saying that, raga bhakti, you know, the adhikar for raga bhakti is greed. No? But again, we may have to, in the context of cultivating our greed, we may have to be patient. We may have to wait. No? So this is the same here. No, we want to attain some goal, some success, if you will. But in the context of that, we will have to wait. No, so this devotee, I was saying all that because of this devotee who was practicing for 8 years. Sincerely was asking. No, I'm not joking about him. He was seriously asking, like, after 8 years, I do not have certain tastes and so on. So how to deal with that? One of the classical questions. So the idea came that I asked him, like, okay, so now you are today in this particular moment of your life, in this stage of your bhajan or your sadhana. So you tell me, are there certain things that you could do to improve your sadhana, that you know by doing those things, by adjusting those things, my sadhana will improve? Can you acknowledge, like, detect some of those things? I say yes. Okay. And are you doing your best effort to try to do those adjustments? Say no. Okay, so there you have the reply to your question, basically. Because it's basically that. And maybe that adjustment is not like the great thing. I mean, you cannot the greatest transformation from today to tomorrow, but it's something here today, something here tomorrow. And you know you could do that, but you are not doing that. So how can you expect to feel whatever you are expecting to feel if you are not doing those things that you know you should do? What to speak of those things that you don't know you should do, but you should do also? Those will come in time. You will realize them whenever first you do those things that you know you have to do. Do not expect to see other things beyond that, because if you have in your face the things that you know, I should change this, and I can do that. You know you can do that. You can do some extra. So if you are not willing to do that, there's nobody to blame or something. No, it's your own responsibility. And again, this is not to say you're guilty and feel shame, but just take responsibility. No, so I will say that more in those terms, not necessarily like you are ungrateful and something. Of course, you can put it like that if you want. No, you are not ungrateful in a way that is. I mean, we have to deal with all these ideas in a way that is healthy for one's practice. You can think in terms, I'm not being grateful enough, in such a way that you get inspired, or you can think about the same thing in a way that you get discouraged. So you have to find the way that is nourishing your thing, because if not, what's the point of that? No, like, I am grateful, I know, and in such a way that you just get depressed and no more sadhana at all. Or in a healthy way that you realize, yes, I could be more grateful, or whatever, however it works better. Of course, because if you apply the whole idea to the last level, yes, if we will be fully grateful and fully aware of, we should be ecstatic at every moment and so on. But again, that may be like idealistic, and we are not there, and that may create a contrast. And if we insist in our mind too much on that on every day, we may get discouraged. So we have to, and there will be different times in our life. Sometimes we may we may need to be more strict in that sense with ourselves, and there's place for that, and that will inspire us. In another stage, I mean, there are different waves in our own journey. What to speak in relation to other people who may have a totally different nature, and whatever works great for them, it may create a disaster for us. No, maybe we are in the same stage, but one has a nature, another has a nature. So, and that has to do with also this idea of embracing our subconscious and shadows, which also has to do with recognizing our acquired nature and knowing how to work with that, because we have a certain nature, swabhav. Krishna says in the Gita, it's not that easy to modify that. No? So and it's not necessarily a must. It's not that you have to modify your acquired nature to practice bhakti, but you can dovetail, as they say, like connect whatever nature you have now in the context of bhakti, and that acquired nature eventually becomes a spiritualized nature. And whatever in this lifetime you have a certain personality, and in context with bhakti, that personality remains, but totally ornamented by the influence of bhakti. So your eternal, if you will, personality in the spiritual world, we have those ingredients, but in the context of bhakti. So that will be a different sense of personality. It's not that everything about who you are now or who you think you are has to be annihilated, and then your real self will, not necessarily. So in that sense, I will say that one has to, not to because sometimes they would take more this negative stance, like denial. Neti neti, too much neti neti, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta say, can throw you into Brahman. This, not that, not this, not that. This is Maya, this is Maya, this is Maya. This is the Jnani's process of denial, and eventually only thing that remains is Brahman. But that's not our school. So we are not just to deny or reject what we have, but mostly learn how to work with the vehicle we have been given physically and also mentally, subtly. So to be successful in one's bhajan is, I'll say, has to do with acknowledging all the things and trying to increase the seriousness, become more serious on a daily basis on some level, increase our commitment with the ideal and make our sadhana more and more a priority in our life, to the point that it becomes our life. The beginning sadhana may be a part of my day, and eventually it has to become my life and soul. Again, it's a process of prioritizing and deprioritizing other things, and that may take some time, again, some lifetimes even. But at least in theory, we should know this is the ultimate converging point. I mean, I have to see how to integrate my spiritual practice with the rest of my life, which somehow still I see as a separate thing. I'm not able yet to integrate all this. So the daily effort of the sadhaka is integrate these things, to the point that there is no separate sense of life. Bhakti is capable of that. You can do everything in the context of bhakti. So it has the potential of making everything part of your bhajan, if you will. You're having a bath, you're cooking, you're going to the toilet, you're engaging in these so-called ordinary activities. It has the potential, but again, it's all a matter of priority, and for that we're required to be serious, remain associated with serious people, very serious practitioners. Serious, I do not mean that they are all days without smiling, but once someone asked Srila Prabhupada that, because in some pictures Srila Prabhupada appears very serious, to the point that you feel he's angry with someone. And of course, in another picture, he's smiling in a very unique way, sweetly. But someone asked Prabhupada, like, why you are so serious sometimes? And he said, because Krishna consciousness is a very serious thing. I mean, it's very serious affair. It's not a joke. I mean, it's not something to just take cheaply or to not give our full attention. Of course, he's pure devotee speaking from that side, fully realizing the nature of the whole thing. Still, for us, as I mentioned, we do not fully believe that. We do not take that seriously yet, and that's our unfortunate, our lack of fortune. But gradually, we are to increase that. So the practice is something too real not to take it seriously. So gradually we are to increase our embrace of our practice and develop this desire of I want to absorb myself more in what I'm doing, because it's a lot about absorption also. Especially if we speak in terms of Raga Nuga Bhakti, bhajan, the term bhajan is not just like, how is your bhajan? Oh, great. What do we mean by that? Actually, if you are really practicing bhajan, probably you won't say great, because you will have a glimpse of how greater your bhajan can become, which is the prospect of real bhajan, that you will always feel like, I'm just trying to absorb my mind in these things. But bhajan has to do with mental absorption, inner absorption. And absorption doesn't mean like I get absorbed 2 minutes a day and the rest of the day my mind is just like wandering who knows where. But it's like ideally gradually, but we have to get close to that stage. Of course, Nishta has a lot to do with that. No, it has to do with the permanent mental absorption in one's idea in certain direction, and that absorption will take different, of course, stages, forms, and modes. No? Absorption in certain emotions, because of mental absorption has to do with emotions. No, what absorbed in a certain particular emotional disposition towards Guru, Vaishnavas, Krishna, Radha Krishna, Gaura-lila. I mean, we know what does it mean in this world. We can be really absorbed in different emotions permanently. No? We have experience of that. No? That's the distorted side of that, but it's showing us we have that capacity. No, we don't have it. We have experience of that. We can be whole day in anxiety without interruption. Hi to Gia Pratihata. No? Or we in angry, or with envy, or with greed, or with love, and totally like fixed. And our mind is like, so now we have to just turn all that in the proper direction. So that's I think a good way of determining our success on a daily basis. You know? Doing what we have to do and understanding I have to get more absorbed in this, more absorbed in my daily chanting, more absorbed. Again, not like a forced pressure that someone is like, you have to do that, and by social pressure, okay, I have to. But the conclusion that you have to reach yourself. Like, I understand that this is the way to do this. This is the way that it will really work. And this is the way that I would like to do it, because, I mean, to fall in love with Krishna means you are totally absorbed in that. I mean, that's the goal. So, and of course, again, we are not in the goal, but how can I get closer to the goal? I have to be doing something in the here and now that is actually getting me closer to the goal. I mean, it's not that it will happen by magic. And we like in false humility say, well, yes, I'm so fallen, Krishna is so merciful, and I'm doing what I can, and someday everything will be nice. And we project this type of idyllic destiny but you are not doing anything now to get there, so it won't happen. At least it won't happen as quick as it should happen again. And again, that's part of the greed. Now, if you really want to advance and to if you are really appreciating what came to you, you will be trying to do as much as you can. Again, knowing that nonetheless you will have to wait. But the fact that I have to wait doesn't mean, oh, then I will be lazy and I won't give my 100%. No, you will ideally try to give your 100%. That's where things start to have meaning and purpose in your life. Because, I mean, if you are not giving your 100% into something that you consider that worthy and valuable, probably you will be frustrated in life, because you have not found an ideal to fully invest yourself, or if you have found it, you are not fully investing yourself in that idea. And we know that bhakti is that idea. It has the full capacity of receive everything we want to give and of properly reciprocating. You see, so much people in the world is investing their whole being tip to toe in so many like relative ideals, limited prospects, but they are giving themselves fully, risking everything. And So we should learn from them also. But of course, they are doing that and they are not experiencing full satisfaction because the ideal is not deep enough, absolute enough. So there's some still frustration. They keep trying. So we have been fortunate enough to meet that ideal that has the potential of fully reciprocating, but we may at some point like dilute our own giving of ourselves to that ideal and just be giving it 65% or 23% because Krishna is so merciful and you follow, no? So sometimes we, in the name of, oh, the ideal is so great, so merciful, so deep, instead of those ideas committing us to fully give ourselves, sometimes we start to rest. Take rest because of the greatness of the ideal. That's so great, so deep, and so incredible. So I just start like to dissolve, but it should be the opposite. You should see all these people in the world like passionately living for the ideal, taking all risks, doing themselves, and then go back to me. And they are doing that with such limited ideal. I come in touch with such unlimited ideal. How I'm dealing with that? Again, not with guilt and shame, but just like we need sometimes this type of inputs, like to, okay, what can I do today to increase my commitment? Again, in a sustainable way. Do not go paranoid, please. What can I do today, no? to increase my embrace of the ideal a little bit? Tomorrow it's another day. We will speak tomorrow about that, but today is today. So how can I give myself more fully today in a way that is not dysfunctional, but in a way that will invoke the change and transformation that I feel the need to experience. So the day does not go in vain and I feel nothing has happened, practice is not working, because sometimes these kind of things may come. Srila Prabhupada will say, at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, you think about these things, how you lived your day today, how much progress did you make, how much change you were able to do, how willing you were to do those things. So then you can conclude how much the day was worthy of living or not, or we were just like in a mechanical mode, just going through the motions and doing what I need to do externally and internally, like totally distracted. So sometimes that can happen, and we have to learn from that also. I mean, if we learn from that, that was not a fully lost day. So yeah, we have to gradually switch from distraction to absorption. And of course, when you're absorbing something, you get distracted of other things. So there's always the two things working at the same time, distraction and absorption. The point is, which is my object of distraction and object of absorption at the present moment. So anyhow, some ideas. I don't know if I addressed anything of your question, but that's what came. So, and yeah. There is one question here in the chat, so we'll go to the online. We have some minutes. One question from Kushi Singh. So it says, Mahaprabhu, as an incarnation of Krishna, I wonder why he's not part of the Dasavatars of Vishnu. Also, does Mahaprabhu reside in Vaikuntha Lok or Golok? Thanks for your reply. Well, actually, for us Gaudiyas, we have a particular approach to not only Mahaprabhu, but to Krishna and Vishnu, which may differ from that of other sampradayas. And it's okay, no problem. There should be no problem. That's what makes a sampradaya. Means they have different approach to the absolute. And if everyone thinks it the same way, all of them belong to the same sampradaya. So the fact that there are different sampradayas, I mean, there are different ways of addressing that same absolute reality, which does not necessarily shouldn't be a problem. So for example, you go to the Sri Sampradaya, Ramanuja Sampradaya also called, and their particular outlook is Krishna's two Bhagavan Swayam doesn't count for them. For them, Krishna is not the supreme personality of Godhead, no, but Vishnu, Narayana, is the source of all other forms of divinity, even Krishna. For them, Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. So that's a particular outlook that, of course, we as Gaudiyas have another view. But it's not that they are totally wrong and they are in Maya and that's all Apasiddhanta. And it's not like that. There is place for that. And that's a big lesson to begin with, because, I mean, in order not to be sectarian and just think my own view is the only one, and you go to eternity and you realize, I mean, there are bhaktas who are worshiping Ramachandra, residing with him eternally in Ajodhya, and they consider he's the all in all. So if they are so mistaken, how they can reach a place in eternity with that outlook? And the ones who feel Narayan is the source of everything, they have their place in eternity for that viewpoint. It's not that they are in Maya and they will never enter the spiritual world because they think differently than me. I want to enter the spiritual world by thinking like that. So that's what happened with Gopakumar. That's and it's charming. No, Gopakumar is, Sanatana Goswami gives all these lessons in the very first book of our Gaudiya Sampradaya, which is the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And there he's showing Gopakumar having a particular affinity for Krishna as a friend in Golok, but traveling through so many other places. And by places, I mean also ways of addressing the absolute, different outlooks. And he's not condemning them, he's appreciating them, but at the same time, he's following his inner clarion call, if you will, no? His own affinity. So, for example, he goes to Vaikuntha, and everyone is worshiping Narayan in Aishwarya Bhav, as it should be. and he's appreciating that. And he stays for some time in the different places and somehow hangs out with the devotees there, if you will. But eventually he feels, I don't think this is fully my environment. So his inner affinities, again, his bhakti samskars are taking him somewhere else till, of course, he finally reaches Golok. But when he reaches Vaikuntha, he finds, I mean, they are worshiping by Narayan in awe and reverence with love in that context. And this is charming. But also they are considering, Krishna as an avatar of Vishnu here. I mean, he's not saying, I'm getting out from this place, they're all offenders to my deity or something. He's just like charmed by, oh, interesting how they are approaching my Krishna. Or like what Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, no? He said, when you visit a temple, not a Gaudiya or Hindu temple, if you visit a mosque, you say, like a church or whatever, you can naturally feel, oh, how interesting how they're worshiping my Krishna here. Internally, you won't be just giving a discourse to the people there, like, this, my Krishna is there, no. But in your own way of dealing with that, it's not like this is different, this is wrong, this shouldn't be done like this, or whatever. It's like, wow, interesting. No, so again, for us Gaudiyas, Mahaprabhu is, to begin with, not an incarnation of Krishna, or let's begin with, Krishna is not an incarnation of Narayan. Krishna-das Kaviraj Goswami makes a long elaboration on this on the third chapter of the Adi-lila. Yesterday I just briefly mentioned it. And he makes great effort to show how Krishna is not an avatar of Narayan, but the other way around. For us Gaudiyas, again, in the Gaudiya perspective, he quotes verses from Shastra. He shows different sections in the Bhagavatam when Narayan himself is the famous story with Mahavishnu is kidnapping the sons of a Brahmin who after being born die immediately, one after the other. And at one point Arjuna comes and say, I will protect those sons, those children, and if this is not happening, I kill myself, says Arjuna, like in full Kshatriya spirit. If I cannot do that, my life has no meaning. So the next child comes, and Arjuna is like protecting with arrows and so on, but eventually the child like vanishes. So the Brahmin starts to say, you speak so much, Arjuna, and now my child got lost and all, and start. And Arjuna is about to kill himself. At that moment, like Krishna appears and say, no, 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 no. This is the whole purpose to this thing. So we will go and find all these children. I think there were like 6 or something. So they go to Mahavishnu, which is Narayan. Krishna and Arjuna go there. And eventually Mahavishnu Narayan is telling in the Bhagavad, I did all this thing because I want to have your darshan. He says to Krishna. So it's Krishna's, I mean, if Narayan is saying that to Krishna, like Krishna's expansion is willing to have the darshan of the original, if you will. No? or the famous section where the Brahma Vimohan Lila, you have been studying that recently, if I'm not mistaken, some lectures from my Guru Maharaj. So at one point of the whole thing, that's the section of the Bhagavatam which has the most Aishwarya. And that's happening in Vrindavan, interestingly. You know, in this moment where all the calves and gopas that were expansions of Krishna manifest in a way in front of Brahma with his 4 heads like roller coaster, like Krishna and Narayans worshipping, like Narayans, thousands of Narayans and Brahmas worshipping those Narayans. So full Aishwarya and showing how Narayans are coming from Krishna, basically. No? So again, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has a case to make concerning Krishna's 2 Bhagavan Swayam. And of course, we could say Jiva Goswami himself writes a whole book, Krishna Sandarbha, just to explain that line, Bhagavatam line, Krishna's 2 Bhagavan Swayam, which means Krishna is the original, if you will, form of Godhead from which all the other forms come. So the Bhagavatam makes this bold statement. It's only one line, but if you understand properly that line is the Paribhas Sutra of the book. Paribhas Sutra means sutra means a very condensed 2, 3, 4 words section, but around which the whole text is revolving. So the whole Bhagavatam is revolving around this statement of Tattva. Krishna is 2 Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the words of Prabhupada. And if someone may say, well, that's only one line, you're making too much of the line. Jiva Goswami say, you read my Krishna Sandarbha and you tell me if I'm making too much. No? So it's a whole treatise, long one, to explain how Krishna is the source of all forms of the divinity. So we have as Gaudias our points to make concerning Krishna being avatari and not avatara. Avatari means the source of all avatars, of all divine descents. And as we explained yesterday, so if you didn't see my lecture yesterday, Kushi Singh, you can go through that. Then we spoke how Mahaprabhu is not actually an avatar or incarnation. I do not use the word incarnation because it implies the idea of incarnate. Carne means like flesh, like entering into material body, which in this case, the term of avatar means from up to down, the etymology of the word, which speaks that it's coming from up, although coming here, it's not being touched by this environment. So Mahaprabhu is not an avatar of Krishna, but Mahaprabhu is, as we said, if you will, the most upgraded form of Krishna himself. It's non-different from Krishna, Nomi Krishna Swarupam. And the word Swarupa may also mean core essential form. So when Chaitanya Charitamrita says Radha Bhava Dyuti Subalitam Nomi Krishna Swarupam, means Mahaprabhu is Krishna, or Mahaprabhu is Krishna's essential form. It's not an avatar. It's Krishna himself in a very unique, as you say, disposition. As my Guru Maharaj likes to say. There are certain features. This is another point that shows the supremacy of Krishna. Rupa Goswami mentioned. He engaged in their books in establishing this notion that Krishna is 2 Bhagavan Swayam. Because the prevalent idea at the time was Narayan is God and Krishna is an avatar. That was like the mainstream notion. So in the beginning of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the Goswamis in their books, Sanatana Goswami, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Jiva Goswami, the Sandarbhas, Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and other books, they very carefully crafted the whole notion of the Sampradaya showing actually Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. That takes effort and work. We repeat that, and for us it's day one, yes. But there's so much background to that to establish that in a particular time frame, society, where the prevalent idea is another one, Narayan is God, and what to speak of Mayavad currents and Advaita Vedanta. So Rupa Goswami mentioned what? 64 qualities that are found in Krishna. Some of them are found in certain degree on jivas, the first 50 or 50, I think, yeah, on 54 something. Then some other qualities which are only to be found in some exalted beings like Mahadeva and so on, and or other forms of the divine like Narayan. And then he goes with the last 4 attributes that he says this is only to be found in Krishna, in Vrindavan, Braja Krishna even, because there's a whole hierarchy of Krishnas also. And because not only Krishna is above Narayan, but Krishna in Vrindavan is, as we say yesterday, no? Purna, Purnatara, Purnatam, most complete in Vrindavan, even above his forms in Mathura and Dwarka. So he said there are 4 attributes that are only found in Braja Krishna, which show how he's superior, if you will. Again, be careful of going to a Sri Vaishnava and my God is superior to, it's not in that sense. But in terms of bhava and rasa, yes, Krishna is Akila Rasamriti. So these are Prem Madhurya, Lila Madhurya, Rupa Madhurya, and Benu Madhurya. No? Krishna has sweet Prem, he experiences and reciprocates sweet Prem, Lila Madhurya, sweet pastimes, sweet form, Rupa Madhurya, and sweet flute, Benu Madhurya. So Narayan doesn't have a flute to begin with, so what to speak of it being sweet? Another thing. So my Guru Maharaj will say, so Krishna has Prem Madhurya, and he's interested in tasting this Prem Madhurya, this sweet love that is only found in Braj. And we don't see any other avatar interested in that. Varaha, Nrsimhadev, Bhamandev, they're not after Prem Madhurya. But Mahaprabhu is totally into that from a particular perspective, no, experiencing the sweetness of Radha. So the conclusion is he must be Krishna, because I mean, not an avatar of Krishna. That's my point, because avatars of Krishna are no concern for Prem Madhurya. Only Swayam Bhagavan, Avatari Krishna, is concerned for Prem Madhurya. So if we find some other form of divinity equally concerned for Prem Madhurya, or even more than Krishna, it must be Krishna. It cannot be even an avatar of Krishna. You follow my point, or my Guru Maharaj's logic? So in that way, he's saying Mahaprabhu is not an avatar of Krishna, because the avatars of Krishna are not interested in Prem Madhurya. Mahaprabhu is all about that. So in that sense, I'm trying to show this point, no? Like, first, Krishna is not an avatar of Vishnu, and then Mahaprabhu is not an avatar of Krishna, but it's Krishna himself. So the question is, why he's not part of the Dasavatars of Vishnu? Well, we could say because he's not an avatar. He's not an avatar. And again, we do not conceive these Dasavatars as necessarily in that light, because generally the idea with Dasavatars is all these 10 forms that we already all know that. Nrsimhadev, no, let's begin in order. Matsya, Kurma, Baraha, Baraha, Nrsimhadev, Vamandev, Parasuram, Ramchandra, Krishna Balaram, actually, yeah, Balaram, sometimes Krishna Balaram, Buddha, and Kalki Avatar. So generally, the popular idea is all these are avatars of Vishnu. Again, it's more this notion of Vishnu is the source. So our approach to Dasavatar is quite different. Dance or Krishna, Balaram are an avatar of Vishnu. So there's a different theological perspective. So what to speak of Mahaprabhu? So he's not part of that list, which again, it doesn't mean that because he's not in the Dasavatar list, he's out of the real thing or something. Actually, Dasavatar list is invoked by Jayadev Goswami in his Gita Govinda. He begins the whole Gita Govinda by singing about Dasavatara, Keshavadrita, and so on. Vamana Rupa, Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hari Jai. But it's not that something that is mentioned like, I don't know, in our main shastras, that Dasavatar, this is the least. I mean, it's not limited to 10 avatars. I mean, there are Asankhya in the Bhagavatam. It's mentioned how many avatars are there of Bhagavan. Bhagavatam says Asankhya, which means uncountable. So these 10 refer in one direction or another, but it's not that Mahaprabhu needs to be there in order to be special or something, because he's special. He's in a list, in a category of his own, we could say. And concerning the last question, does Mahaprabhu reside in Vaikuntha Lok or Golok? Well, we could say Golok is, Vaikuntha is a general, there's two ways of speaking about the term Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha can refer to the spiritual world in general and to all the different sections there, Vrindavan, Dwarka, Mathura, Ayodhya, and so on. Or Vaikuntha can refer to that, let's say, platform of the spiritual world, which has this particular mood where Vishnu is worshipped in Aishwarya Bhav. So Mahaprabhu's planet, if you want to call that way, realm called Nityanavada, we spoke about yesterday a little bit about that. That's a natural extension of Golok. That's why we call Golok Vrindavan, and its innermost chamber, if you will, is Golok Navadvip. We go this conceive of that in that way. So it's a Vibhu Vrindavan, as we say yesterday, an extended Vrindavan. When Vrindavan reaches its most deepest and natural extension, it appears as Navadvip. In the same way, like Mahaprabhu is the most natural and confidential extension of Braja Krishna, basically. If you play out all the implications of who Braja Krishna is, then you have Mahaprabhu. If you play out all the implications of what Vrindavan represents, then you have Golok Navadvip, if you will. So there are some series of lectures more in detail, specifically about Nitya Navadvip, that you can go to. So there is one more question by Kushi Singh in this follow-up question. Says, in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, does Krishna have avatars? Yes, of course, as we mentioned, for us, Krishna is the source of all divine descents, of all avatars. So all these avatars that we have been speaking about are considered as avatars of Krishna and many others. Okay, so I don't know if there's one last question maybe before we finish. If there are any questions, we already have 1 hour, but sir?
Yesterday,
yes,
I was wondering, could you explain how very nicely how the Krishna-lila unfolds into Gaura-lila in a very nice way, how it's an extension of it and how it unfolds perfectly onto it. But since it's a cyclical and you can go from each lila to the other, how the Krishna-lila unfolds from the Gaura-lila, I would like to hear an explanation of that. But I imagine it, but I think your explanation is going to be much more beautiful and going to make sense.
Yeah, of course, again, it's something that we try to speak about, but in one point, it's whatever we can say and how we can conceive that at our particular situation may be limited because, yes. Claro, sí. 1 second, he's translating question into Spanish. Okay, resumida la traducción. So again, we are in one sense limited by words. What we can say, as Srila Prabhupada would say, the ultimate answer to the things is, why don't you go there and find it for yourself? No? Because there's nothing that can replace anubhav or personal experience. So it's not about that they are, because we may just think about this in terms of geography, like you are here and you are there, and when you are taken from Gaura-lila to Krishna-lila, you travel in space to some other place, and you are no longer in the other place. It's not like that. No? It's all about dimensions of consciousness. And of course, we need to explore ourselves, our own potential as consciousness. And as much as we have not done so, we have not done our homework fully yet, we won't be able to fully grasp how this is taking place. Because again, it's not that now I'm here, I'm no longer there. No, like for example, you always hear, okay, Krishna is in Golok Vrindavan, but we always hear Krishna is executing his lila on earth, always. So it's not that he's there and you go to Golok and there's some sign like, I'm on earth now, back soon, or something. So, and he's there with his associates, there and there. So you start like you try to think about that, and it's not working, no? So basically the notion is that of cyclical time or like the interrelatedness between one lila and the other is like that. No, it's not that you are just traveling, no, but my Guru Maharaj will say, you go to Krishna-lila, and when Krishna-lila reaches its point, and he gives the example of what the Bhagavad, the Gopi Gita, song of separation of the gopis and Radha flourishing in full. How to say, full-blown prem for Krishna. And at that moment, Krishna is hankering for that experience. So in that sense, we could say Krishna-lila is taken to Gaura-lila, because Krishna-lila is played out in such a way that its fullest implications have to correspond with the new, quote unquote, new lila. In that way, we could say Krishna-lila is taking us to Gaura-lila, maybe not in the same way as necessarily like, okay, all the devotees in Vrindavan are in certain lila, and at some point, I don't know, they start to sing about something and they enter into Gaura-lila, not necessarily as it happens in Gaura-lila with Krishna-lila. That sometimes it's described that Swarup Damodar is doing some kirtan about Krishna-lila, because Gaura-lila is all about being devotees of Krishna. You know, Mahaprabhu is there in that mood, basically, and all the devotees are following suit. So the very nature of the lila is such that it takes us in a certain way to Krishna-lila. Because Gaura-lila is sadhaka, nityanavadip is sadhana siddha bhumi. Or these perfected beings of Krishna-lila are in Navadvip, but acting as devotees, as we say yesterday. Siddha Krishna is acting, all of them are joining Krishna. Mahaprabhu is in the mood of Radha, in devotion to Krishna. So part of their daily life in that lila is they are devotees of Krishna. So they have to sing about Krishna, think about Krishna. So but they do that in such a way that every time the kirtan starts, every time the katha begins, everyone is transported in that direction. And that should happen to us now. That they are showing what should be happening to us whenever kirtan starts. And we ideally, ultimately, have to be transported into that reality. You know? It's not that you read the Bhagavatam and now it's one book, one more book, but actually it's a book that you should enter into. You should live. As my Guru Maharaj will say, there is one blank page in the Bhagavatam that is waiting for you to fill with your own life story of love for Krishna, eternally there. So when we hear this lila narrative in the beginning, yeah, we hear it's nice, but ultimately you don't hear. When you hear lila, you do not how to say it? The ideal way of hearing Bhagavatam, which is a lot about lila, Krishna-lila in Vrindavan especially, it's not that I'm hearing that as a witness, but I'm hearing that as a participant of that. Ultimately, that has to happen. It's not that you are witnessing something that is happening in Vrindavan, but you are a member of that thing that is happening. That's the ultimate level of dealing with Harikatha. So that's what's taking place in Gaura-lila. No? They hear about some lila or some kirtan depicting some lila, and everyone is there in their respective identities in that lila. So because the nature of Gaura-lila is all of us are devotees, but at the same time, all of them are perfected beings. So when they act as devotees, they are very nice devotees. As my Guru Maharaj will say, they sing kirtan, and after 5 seconds, everyone is totally fainted in kirtan. So they show the maximum level of reach of all devotional activities in perfection at every minute there. So since the Gaura-lila has that nature, all of them are devotees. Naturally, the implications of that is when they sing about Krishna, they are transported into Krishna-lila. But in Krishna-lila, the mood and the nature is different. It's not Gaura-lila. They are not devotees singing about Gaura-lila and being transported to. So since the dynamics of the Krishna-lila are slightly different, it's not that there it has to take place in the exact same way as it takes place from Gaura-lila to Krishna-lila. It's another like framework. So the way that Krishna-lila is taking us to Gaura-lila is more, again, not on how the lila unfolds on a daily basis, but more in the sense of the ultimate reach of Krishna-lila and the implications of that reach correspond with Gaura-lila. That's the way how journalists connected this notion of Gaura-lila taking to Krishna-lila. But yeah, the two are really interconnected, inseparable realities, basically. No? Because again, if you are in Krishna-lila, how to say, Krishna-lila is not only Krishna-lila, but all that Krishna-lila can be. So what's the potential of Krishna-lila? We could say the ultimate potential of Krishna-lila is Gaura-lila. No? And we as Gaudis are to think in these terms, not only thinking about things about what they are, but all that what they can be. So in that sense, we could say Krishna-lila is taken to Gaura-lila, because if you play out again the implications of all that it means to be a member of Krishna-lila, immediately you realize, oh, that it ultimately means to be a member of Gaura-lila. Anyhow, words unlimited, and again, conclusion is go there and find it for yourself.
Yeah, we have to wait.
Yeah, but meanwhile, do not only wait. You have to do something meanwhile waiting.
The class connects to the beginning.
Yeah. So do not only wait, do something while waiting. And when you reach there, just 1 second of being there will speak much more of all things that I've been saying here now. So okay, I think we can stop here. Thank you very much to all of you for your time and presence and questions. And see you today for those who can, today in the afternoon, evening. We continue with the second section of Mahaprabhu's Lila in Navadvip. We will speak today about Gaur Purnim, basically, about Mahaprabhu's birth and some Lilas in connection with that. So, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Damodar ji ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda, Divo, Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Hari.